Hey, welcome, welcome. Glad you're here. If y'all start finding your seats. And if you haven't checked in the front, go ahead and let us know that you're here. Grab a booklet. We've got pens for you for taking notes. We're thrilled you're here. My name is Zach. I'm one of the pastors here. My role is congregational care, so working with marriages. I do a lot of premarital counseling, work with a lot of married couples, and so our long-term goals, really, we want to celebrate the goodness of marriage while also acknowledging and being honest about the struggles of it and give Jesus the glory in it all. And so we are so thrilled to invite you to see your marriage enriched if you're not married. But you think about it, maybe one day this is for you as well. And so we're thrilled to have Dr. Cox here joining us for this conference. A few details before we launch in. We have coffee back on the serving line where you got your Chick-fil-A. So if at any point during the conference you want to go grab some coffee, we'll have decaf and regular up there. There are bathrooms behind you, so back left, back right. The recording of this will be posted on our YouTube page afterwards. So I'll send that out to church members and anybody who attended the conference. I'll send you a recording of it. The kids are in room 208. So if you go up the stairs by our library and take a left in that back wing of the children's classrooms. So if you, for any reason you need to get to them, that's where they are. I just wanted to introduce you a little bit to Dr. Cox, tell you about him. He's a clinical psychologist who's a native of Jackson, Mississippi, married to Norma. Y'all been married 40 years. Love that. 3 daughters, 4.8 grandchildren. That's a very specific number. November, there we go. Okay. Very good. Deacon Emeritus here at our sister church, First Pres Jackson. He received his BA from the University of Mississippi, MA in Marriage and Family Therapy from RTS here in town, and then a doctorate from Rosemead School of Psychology in Los Angeles. Currently a clinical psychologist at Live Oak Psychological Associates in Jackson, and he's been in clinical practice for 34 years. He specializes in individual psychotherapy with adults, but also marital therapy and parent consultation and therapy for adolescents and children. I've heard from so many people about your work and the help that you've given and the hope that you've given in people's lives. So thank you for your work, everything that happens in that office. So you speak a lot, and that's real exciting. I'll go to a church and find out that you were there. It's like, hey, that's exciting. In the areas of personal growth, marriage, parenting, and the one story of God's redemption. He's the author of 3 books, Setting Parents Free, which if you've asked me for a parenting book, that's the one I've told you to read. So that is my go-to and the one I most recommend. It's back on the book table. Another one called The One Story, A Psychologist Reaches for the Heart of God. Read that one as well, and it's fantastic. So it walks through God's covenant promises and shows how God relates to us, how we relate to God, and how that influences how we relate to one another. You could summarize it much better than I could, but it's a beautiful book and encourage that. So the book table back there, honor system, if you'd like to pick one up and then shoot a Venmo to John or leave it in the envelope, they're back there. And the study guide is coming out for One Story soon, but can't buy it here yet. But be a great book to walk through with a group. You like to cook and you love to sail. I love that. A little bit of personal about John. But with no further ado, I'd like to welcome you up. Thank you so much for being here. Let me pray for us, please, and then we'll launch in. Heavenly Father, I pray, Lord, that you would open our hearts, open our minds, Lord, to receive good news from your word. Thank you for John, who loves you and loves your word and so well integrates that with what you have taught us through creation and the way you've even designed our bodies and the way we relate together. Thank you for this church. Lord, for the freedom and the hope we have in the gospel, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I pray for hope and healing tonight. I pray, Lord, that you'd be glorified. Thank you for Pastor Ferris speaking to our kids tonight about relationships. I pray that their time would be blessed. But Lord, we come before you grateful. Thank you for the food that you provide for us. And thank you for this time. It's in your precious name I pray. Amen.
Yeah. Larry Ferris is really teaching the kids? Oh, I thought he was kidding. That's cool. That's fantastic. He told me he was teaching them finders keepers. I'm like, okay, good, yeah. All right, I love doing conferences and I hate traveling. So do the math. I'm very happy right now. You know, I'm going to sleep in my own bed. There's no Hampton Inn. There's no, airlines. This is fantastic. It's exciting to see how many of y'all have brought your spouses here for me to change this weekend. It's just really exciting, y'all. I mean, it's going to be so neat to watch them grow, just the changes that they need to make and all that. But welcome to my marriage conference, which I call Finders Keepers. I originally called it John's 10 Easy Steps to Hot, Racy Romance, but my wife told me you couldn't say hot or racy in church, so it's Finders Keepers. But literally, I call it that because I like an opportunity. You know how churches kind of divide off, the singles don't do stuff with the marrieds? Well, I was thinking one day, the principles for a romantic relationship are the same, whether you're dating or whether you're married. So, for married folks, keeping your relationship, building it, enriching it, making it better. And you singles, the principles are the same, and I want you to be learning them now so you can be applying them. We got singles here? Some? Good, yeah. And any of those listening? All right. My hope is, regardless, that you will experience this as hopefully a different kind of marriage conference than maybe you have been to in the past. I'm going to skip over the kind of stuff you can get like in a marriage book, like, getaway weekends and 5 meaningful touches, and men are like microwaves, women are like crock pots, and hopefully go a little deeper, and go a little more substantive. What I want to talk about is this. You know how you want to be closer together? You kind of can imagine that, you long for it, and it doesn't happen. Or you're snippy or you're snarky again, and you've been working on that. Or the way in which you can just be talking about, car insurance. And 3 hours later, somebody's saying, well, we should just split up then, and you're like, whoa, how did we get here? Don't you hate that? I mean, why do we do that stuff? What is it that goes on? I want to give you some traction for understanding your marriage, understanding the set of stuff that goes on inside of us, how marriages work, how people work in marriages. Another thing we could call this conference is sort of marriage behind the scenes, kind of like those tours you can get underneath Disney World where you find out, how the magic happens. I want to take you kind of below and give you some categories. Not just 5 easy steps to go do this, but some real ways of thinking about how you relate, what you're bringing to the table, what your spouse does that makes y'all act like such gizmos sometimes, okay? Marriages grow not just by learning communication skills or love languages or whatever like that. I want to teach you where it is that marriages grow. So I'm glad you're here. And I applaud you for being here, by the way, on a Friday night. I mean, by Friday night, I kind of want to be getting in my jammies, my comfies, maybe a burger on the grill or the diners, drive-ins, and dives. I've worked all week. I don't want to come hear some bozo speak. So anyway, congratulations. Thank you. We're going to talk about marriage, dating, relationships, communication, conflict, intimacy. We're going to do a lot of Q&A tonight and tomorrow. Do you see the number there? That's my Google Voice number, and I think it's different than the one on the handout because I had to change it. Either way, write it down. Here's why. Because, look, I do parenting conferences a lot, and as you might imagine, people follow you to the car with questions at a parenting conference. It's like you're like, okay, yeah, I gotta go. But at a marriage conference, it can get a little sticky because all of us have the easy questions like, what do you do if we kind of reach or button heads and we can't work it out, Doc? But maybe you have a question like, my husband is a rageful maniac. Do you got any thoughts about that? And he's sitting right next to you, like, hey. So what I want to do is to create a context in which you can ask me confidential questions. And that's that Google Voice number. I will default to questions in the group because I like the community aspect of the interaction. And if you text me, make it be a confidential question. You know, because some people will text me, it's like, give us 3 steps for date night. And I'm like, you could have asked that, dude, you know. But I want you to have a resource to ask a question privately in that sense, all right? All right, so as Zach said, Norm and I have been married 40 years. We have 3 kids, all of whom are grown. None live at home. They got jobs. That's on my resume, all right? And now we have almost 5 grandchildren. So actually what I was thinking we would do this weekend is I've got 600 or 800 slides of my grandchildren, and I thought we'd just go through them, and we can do Q&A. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have about them, and, you know. Well, regarding my family life, contrary to what I'm sure you believe, my speaking on marriage did not happen by my wife saying, honey, you make marriage so blissful. You know, you're not gonna take this on the road. You gotta share your secrets. Other wives are missing out. You know, these other husbands could learn so much from you. That's actually not how it happened. All right. You will hear hopefully in my stories this weekend that I'm as big a knucklehead as any of you guys here. So my professional credentials are actually what I'm basing my speaking on. It just won't sound that way because speakers always sound like they're really good at, you know, stuff that they speak on. I was on the airplane flying somewhere I was studying my conference on the plane, and the guy sitting next to me goes, what are you doing? And I said, I'm doing a marriage conference. And he says, so you must be a pretty good husband, huh? And I said, no, I'm a pretty good psychologist. A woman actually asked Norma once, they're going to Florida, like, first thing in the morning, so she's not going to be here, unfortunately, but y'all could ask her this question. I'm sure you'll want to ask her this question. Some woman comes up to her after our conference, and literally says to my wife, what must it be like to be married to him? To which my wife tactfully responded, you have no idea. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you from a position of like my own fallenness as a husband and like kind of trying to fight my own way out of that paper bag of marriage. I hope that will come across in my examples and all that. All right, so let's get started. We got miles to go. I'm going to just go ahead and start by telling you what I think is the biggest problem in marriage. All right, we're just going to cut to the chase. Not a lot of suspense build up here. What is the reason that we struggle, and get that out of the way? And I'm going to explain the reason that we struggle and the biggest problem in marriage by reminding you what I do every day. I'm a clinical psychologist, okay? And I do basically what you would think I would do. I have a couch and a pipe and a sweater, and, you know, I do therapy, right? And basically, you know, I have a kind of a broad practice, mostly adults, depression, anxiety, OCD, whatever, and of course, a lot of marriages. But, well, I don't know how many of y'all have ever gone to therapy before, but most people don't go to therapy just for kicks, you know, like, hey, we always went to therapy as a family every summer, so I thought it'd be fun. You know, it's not how it happens. You see people get into therapy because they got a problem, they got a symptom, they got a boo-boo, they got an owie, you know. Depression and, you know, eating disorder, out of control behaviors, marriage stuff, whatever. Now, that symptom, that problem, there's a backstory to it. And we got to start there. The reason people have marriage problems or struggle with sin in their lives or can't make sense of anxiety or panic attacks or destructive behaviors is not just because they're lazy or stupid or have a chemical imbalance or bad theology. The real reason that most of us struggle, and what I orient so much of my therapy about, and what I will be orienting this conference toward, is what's actually happening is this: to do life and to do relationships and to do marriage and to be a parent and to serve God well requires what we call a collection of emotional abilities. In other words, God made us to where in order to make life work or to have relationships or to have friends or or have a job or be married or heck, buy a car, we need to have a collection of abilities that I call character abilities. Kind of like the software inside your innards, okay? Now, when a psychologist talks about character, we don't mean like integrity, like he's a man of character, nor do we mean like he's a real character. For us, it's kind of a technical term that means kind of the collection of abilities, like the operating system of our souls, of our hearts, the abilities to love or be strong or forgive or manage our impulses or trust. Now, these abilities, we ain't born with them. And we actually have to learn them in the context of relationships. And as we'll say later on tonight and throughout the weekend, we can keep learning them in new relationships, but we're all missing some of them. We got injuries there, we got missing pieces there, we've got wounds there or longings there, whatever. And when we do have some of those missing pieces, what's going to happen is some of that fruit, the symptoms, the problems, okay? In other words, another way you could say this is functioning in life is a lot like being a car. To be a successful car, you have to be able to do lots of things, right? You have to have the ability to go. You have to have the ability to stop, the ability to turn. Up until about 4:30 this afternoon, you needed the ability to have an air conditioner. Hopefully we won't so much from now on. But let's say your car is missing the brakes. So you're cruising along, the freeway of life, and everything's going fine, but all of a sudden there's a traffic jam up ahead. You're going 60 miles an hour, and you start pumping the brakes, but you don't have brakes. You're missing a piece. And so you're pumping, you're slamming into the, Kia Soul that's sitting up there. Now, here's the point, and here's the secret. You do that even though you didn't want to. You do that even though you tried real hard. Maybe even you prayed about it. But you don't have brakes. You're lacking something. Okay? So what are the brakes and the steering wheels of humans? So somebody gets married. Let's pick one of them. We'll talk about this one first tonight, and we'll do a whole session on it tomorrow morning on intimacy. You get married. Did your spouse did they learn the ability in their software to be emotionally close? Did they learn that? Or is it sort of like, after the honeymoon, it's me and my best friend, the remote, okay? Did they learn that ability? Now, here's the key. Maybe they struggle. Maybe they're one of those people who it's like, how you doing, fine, Or you're Little Miss Bottomliner, like, I don't know, who cares how you feel? Let's solve the problem. The key is this. If they are like that, it's usually not because they don't care. It's usually not because you're not important to them. What we found is it's usually because they weren't taught that ability in a relationship. They're missing some software. And guess what? They can learn it. We're going to build categories here this weekend that I want you thinking, this might be an ability I'm missing, and you can learn it, okay? All right, so maybe they move to destructive behaviors. Maybe they drink too much, or yell too much, or porn too much, or gossip too much. In other words, did they develop the ability to manage their impulses, to say no to jerky stuff? This is a heart ability, a character ability. We have to be taught. By the way, those of you who have read my parenting book, this is kind of that model applied to grown-ups, if it sounds familiar. Can they manage difficult people in their life? Can they stand up to their boss, or to the contractor, or to a jerky spouse? Or do they live always in a kind of compliant child position? I'm afraid of upsetting people. I'm afraid of saying no. Did they develop that ability? These aren't just personality traits. They're literally capacities, I think, in the image of God that we learn or don't learn, okay? Can they apprehend what it means to be forgiven? That's a character ability. We're going to be building a list here for y'all. That'll stop in. Did they develop the software? Were they taught? We'll talk about this later tonight. The ability to fail and it not be like catastrophic. Can I let you down, or you're disappointed in me and I don't lose my cool? Can I screw up and not go judgmental, condemn me, guilt-ridden, full of shame? Okay? Now, this is just 4. We'll look at 4 tonight, 5 tonight. These are abilities. If you ask a shrink, what do you need to make life work? What do you need to not get depressed? What do you need to manage anxiety? What do you need to do marriage well? I'll be telling you, there's a collection of abilities that God created you to need, and I'm going to talk to you about what they are. Okay? Now, that's kind of an example of the abilities. But here's the problem. I don't know if you've been keeping up with current events or not, but we're all missing some of these abilities. And this is where we start your marriage therapy here tonight, okay? The biggest problem of marriage, remember what I told you was, I was going to tell you the biggest problem first? Here it is. The biggest problem in marriage is that we are all missing some of these abilities. The biggest problem is that any marriage, pick a marriage, you put two sinful, incomplete, broken, wounded, needful humans in the same house together, both of whom are missing some of the software that you absolutely have to make life work, and they start encountering the challenges or the difficulties that life and marriage, for goodness sake, definitely throw at us, like to be intimate or manage conflict or to forgive or to manage my emotions. And guess what? They reach for that brake pedal, pump, 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 and the car doesn't stop. And I hurt you again, and we're having the same fight again. Or I wish we were close and we're not close again. Or I'm popping off at you again. Or I'm pulling back in the same distance again. Or you singles, another breakup, okay? And here's the key. Remember the car? Even though they don't want to do that. Even though they are trying real hard to not do that. Even though they have fought long and hard to try to not be that way. So, here's my point, and where we start tonight, and kind of a defining principle that's going to echo out through the rest of the weekend, is we both come to marriage, this place we've been told is kind of going to be the fount of fulfillment and joy for you. Or you singles, you're unhappy because you're not married. I'm sorry. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, we come to marriage not really realizing that marriage requires a boatload of these abilities Cox is talking about, and we start running into stuff that we can't do, we start running into stuff that our spouse can't do, so stuff doesn't get done, so we have marriage problems, or we have work problems, or we have spiritual problems. And you're thinking, marriage hurts so much. I knew I should have married that bass player, But the problem isn't ultimately with your marriage. The problem is that we're both lacking these abilities, and we can fix that. I just want you fixing the right thing. Tonight is a big picture model of marriage. I want to give you a new format for thinking about marriage, which is why I do this on Friday nights. I want you to leave with a new model, a different way of thinking about your relationships, okay? The problem is not that you don't care or that you're married to a jerk. The problem is that we're both missing these character abilities. Now, this is good news and it's bad news. The good news is no one's the bad guy, okay? Your spouse did not wake up this morning thinking, how can I make them miserable today? I'm going through the alphabet. I think I'm at M. Let's see, I'm going to moan a lot. I don't know. Your spouse is not looking for ways to be hurtful. You're both missing something. Good news, nobody's the bad guy. Bad news, you're both screwed up. Okay? In other words, you're both not working with a lot of the abilities that God created us to have in order to make life work. You're both coming to the table contributing to the problems because of your own limitations and stuff. We aren't bad guys, we're incomplete guys. Okay? It's like I told a couple recently who were talking about divorce. I said, if I'm going to get real honest with you guys after kind of getting to know you, y'all are contemplating kind of trading in this car, like dump the marriage, get a divorce. To be real honest with you, the problem is not with your marriage. The problem is not with your car. The problem is you guys are both bad drivers. You don't need a new car. You need driver's ed, So point one in John's marriage conference is the problem is not with your marriage. The problem is that we're all lacking these character abilities that we have to make life work, and we're going to talk about what they are. So here's the correct question, and the question that will change your marriage. And this is the one I want you to both start asking. Hey, honey, how do we both start growing in our hearts together to do marriage stuff better? Cox is going to give us some categories. Cox is going to give us some hooks to hang this on, some ways of understanding the way we relate. You want to grow some, huh? What do I need in my software to start managing love? Loving better, being loved better. What do I need? What are those abilities? Let's learn those together. Because the issue here isn't that, oh my gosh, you're such a jerk. The issue here is we're both incomplete. Want to kind of join hands, not as enemies, but as friends, and kind of grow there? You start thinking that way, which is why I'm starting there, and that's going to change your marriage, okay? In other words, before we do a marriage conference, we kind of got to do a you conference, okay? Now, this is going to do two things. One is it's going to stop the blame, which basically has to happen. Most marriages become what I call blame marriages. In other words, what I hear in my office is, like, think about it. What is your natural inclination in your marriage when you encounter a problem? We blame each other for it, you know? It's like, what's more fun than that, you know? It's one of the reasons you get married. You have somebody to blame, okay? In other words, what I hear in my office is he language, what I call he language or she language. It's like, you don't believe what he did this or she did that. Or the one, a couple I was seeing just the other day do something I call leading the witness. Why don't you tell Dr. Cox what you told me last? I'm like, what? No, that's leading the witness. It's like, tell the jury, sir, where you were on the night of the bar fight. You know, it's like, no. Now, as we'll see, that's our natural inclination. And most couples, when we have a problem, we'll talk about this a ton tomorrow under conflict, is instead of actually addressing the problem and fixing it and solving it, we spend all day, all night, 1:30 in the morning playing badness hot potato as to who's the bad guy, you know. Which, in a sense, is one of the biggest problems in marriage, is that we tend toward blame. Now, we learned this ability, this inclination from our dear mother and father, Adam and Eve. Think about them. What happened? What did they do when they sinned? They sin, and what do they immediately start doing? They start hiding, right? They're in the bushes. They make clothes out of fig leaves. We're not even going to go there. And then God's walking, and he's cool today. He's looking for them. And he says, where are you? And Adam says, we're hiding because we're naked. He said, who told you were naked? And Adam does what any self-respecting husband would do. He blames his wife, right? In fact, actually, if you read the passage, he blames God and Eve in the same sentence. Like, the woman who you gave to me, which, like a double whammy. I'm thinking this is pretty good for his first day as a sinner. You know, I mean, he's taken right to. He's a natural. I think this guy's he's gifted. You know, So our default is blame. We love to blame. We always have. It's not my fault. It's yours. Now, if you haven't noticed, this blame thing doesn't get you very far. It never solves the problem in your marriage, and your spouse will rarely go, you know, honey, you're right. It was my fault. So instead of blame, where I'm going to be taking you is a different way of looking at marriages, where we begin like the gospel by saying, you know what? We're both to blame. I mean, you want to blame? There's plenty. Let's pass it around. The truth is, we both need grace. Our marriage growth has got to start the same place our relationship with God grows. And that is with the safety to say, I'm fallen and broken. Are you? Want to get married? Want to stay married? You want to be broken together? Or you want to just beat each other up in condemnation because you're not what I wish you were? You want to grow together? First step is to get out of that blame position and start going to a place that says, like the gospel, I want us to begin in a place where we say, the rule here is that condemnation has no place. Okay? You're not the bad guy. Our screwed upness is the bad guy. Hang on a second. I'm going to draw you something. Ah, good. Excellent. This is something I tell my clients all the time. Told a couple yesterday about it. Here's a way of looking at it, all right? There's actually 4 people in every marriage. All right, is that showing up? All right, there's big you and there's big her, right? And then there's little you and there's little her. Now, big her and big you get along just fine, all right? It's these little kids who are always fighting. This is broken stuff. It's the incomplete stuff. So you come in and you go, oh, meatloaf again for dinner? Now, big her would probably go, yeah, you like meatloaf, okay? But that's not who hears it. Who hears it is little her, who's like, he walks in the door complaining about our food. And she says, like, little her is like, well, if you don't like it, you can cook dinner. And you're like, big you might be able to hear that pretty well. But little you's like, she doesn't understand how hard I work all day. Okay, and pretty soon, these little guys are like beating each other up. Okay? And I want you to have this category. You two probably get along just fine, just the two of you. Okay? It's these little kids that are making all the trouble. And I want you to have that distinction, the incompleteness. By the way, I got to tell this joke on myself. The first time I ever did this, I wasn't really thinking, and I used circles. And I suddenly had the gigantic 8th grade boy joke on my keynote. So these are squares. Do you understand? If this gets out of this room, it was squares. I'll die on that hill. Squares. All right, so one thing you have in common is that you're both incomplete and you're both a mess and you both want to stop hurting, right? There's couples who say, we have nothing in common. I'm like, well, actually, one thing you both have in common is you don't want to keep hurting and you're both unhappy and you want to feel better. In that sense, you're like sames and samesies, besties. So step one, just like the gospel, our first job is, and what I've been doing for the last 30 minutes is I want to create a context in which it's safe to be fallen because your marriage is fallen and you're going to default to a blame marriage and that's going to make you both miserable and hate each other and it's never going to resolve anything. Okay? So step one is to get out of that position. All right? Now, step two, gospel doesn't stop just with grace. How do we grow? Let's start looking like Christ. How about it? All right? And this is where we're going this weekend. We're going to talk about what's broken in us, what are the things that we need, how those things get messed up, what are my blind spots, what are your blind spots. Let's grow together. And I want you doing this not as enemies, but as friends, broken, fallen friends, all right? Not a blame marriage, but what I call a growth marriage, okay? Hey, honey, we're both incomplete here. Let's let Cox help us grow. You want to? Okay? You want a good marriage? That's what a good marriage sounds like, okay? Not like, oh, we're full of bliss. I've been in the trenches for 40 years doing marriage therapy. Yes, do the math. I actually was doing marriage therapy before I was married. It was so life-giving, y'all. I really helped some people, But in those trenches, there's not the, we're just so happy. The real trenches is, I'm broken and so are you, and how do we love each other in that? You hear how the gospel is echoed in that? All right? So let's start talking about this, what we're going to do the rest of the night, and then we're going to expand on these tomorrow morning. What do we have to have ticking inside of us to drive this car well? What do we need to do marriage well? And I want you both thinking as I go through these tonight, which one of these might be one of my blind spots? Where might be an area here that I might need to grow? Some of the unpleasantness in our marriage, could it be because I can't do this so well? And I want you also thinking, I wonder if this is a place my spouse needs to grow. And I want you thinking it in that order, okay? Think about you first. And you singles, I want you listening and thinking, I want to help you be developing a grid to be like, how do I build a complete software package here for what in the image of God a human needs in order to have a good relationship? What might I be missing? What might my boyfriend be missing? And besides, basic principle of psychology, we tend to marry people of about our own level of psychopathology. So the healthier you are, the better picker you'll be, okay? So therefore, you marry people when you're saying to your spouse, oh my gosh, you're just a 6-year-old. Okay? So, they probably are. You picked them. All right, so what do we need character-wise to do marriage? I call them the 4 I's. They say there's no I in team. Well, there is in marriage. There's 2 of them, like Mississippi. So there's 3 in Mississippi, but anyway. And they are about intimacy and closeness. In other words, how do we get connected, stay connected, vulnerability, all that. You expect to hear that at a marriage conference, right? Check. All right. Also, the issue of identity, separateness, boundaries, power, individuality. Can I be me and you be you? God calls the first one abiding, love your neighbor. God calls the second one steadfastness, telling the truth, stewardship, all right? The ability to make sense of imperfection. In other words, how do I deal with loss, sorrow, the ways you let me down? And of course, you probably never have to deal with the ways in which I let you down, but and of course, God's big on this one. Forgiveness, humility, repentance, log out of your eye, okay? And the whole issue of managing my impulses, my emotional world. Can I say no to what is evil, yes to what is good? Can I resist the devil and he will flee from you? One of the things that you will find as we go through these is you're going to have trouble soon, I hope, figuring out whether I'm talking about something God is calling you to or something I've found in 40 years of doing therapy that is healthy for you. Why? Because they're the same thing, okay? So you will hear image of God themes here as you hear healthy marriage things here, all right? So let's look at them. Intimacy. Relational closeness, attachment, connection, sharing your heart, belonging. This is going to be a whole talk tomorrow in the morning on intimacy. And when it comes to intimacy, this is key. You got to be able to go 2 ways with it. Okay? We'll come back to why that's so important. But can I let you in, but can I and also can I keep you in? These are going to be super vital, okay? And I want you thinking as I start talking about this, how well did I learn this? Could this be one of my blind spots? If it is, good. Put a check mark by it. We'll move on, all right? All right, can I let you in? Think about what we usually talk about in our lives. Basically, we chit-chat, news, sports, and weather. What about that political issue? What about the city streets? Can you believe it's this drought? We chit-chat, news, sports, and weather. Get it, right? Or we communicate to solving a problem or give an opinion. Like, I think we ought to get that used car, or I think we need to remodel or move, whatever. We talk to chit-chat, or we talk to solve problems, and that's valid. We'll talk about that tomorrow. We need to make life work. We're not building a commune here. But if that's all you do, if all you do in a relationship is be able to communicate kind of your opinion or solve a problem or fix something or, chit-chat, if that's the deepest you can go, I won't ever really get a sense of who you are. I won't be able to be emotionally close to you, because what we also talk about, besides news, sports, and weather, problem solving, and all that, is we say things like, I've got a meeting tomorrow and I'm really actually kind of afraid about it. I have a lot of anxiety about it. Or, I'm feeling kind of lonely from God lately. Sort of like I'm going to church and I don't feel any connection with him. Or I feel ashamed about what I said last night. Or I can see how tired you are. All right? Now, what are these things? These things are the truth. They are my heart. And I've gone beyond the yeah of kind of daily life chit-chat. I've started telling you more about who I am, how I feel. I'm not shucking and jiving. I'm not just saying, hey, I'm fine. In other words, we're telling the truth about our hearts. There's a sense in which you could say this. Facts are essentially the truth about my head. Feelings are going to be the truth about my heart. And we'll talk about feelings more tomorrow, because when it comes to the emotional world, connecting to other people, how people emotionally experience you is core to the connection, all right? And I run into male and female who, jump to sort of fixing, and they miss the heart, and they don't understand why their spouse feels icky. Now, when it comes to external reality, like whether that truck is going to hit me or not, how I feel about it doesn't have a lot of meaning, okay? But when it comes to really connecting with somebody, it's the closest thing I can have. So, can I let you in means, did I develop the ability to know what I feel, to talk to you, to share what I feel, and then to care about what you feel? That's intimacy. all right, with another human being. It's not like rocket surgery. So for a marriage to be meaningful, we kind of need to be able to go below the surface and ask questions about, can I let you in? Otherwise, your marriage is going to have the emotional animation of a Dragnet rerun, right? Y'all remember Dragnet? Y'all old enough? I'm running into more and more crowds who don't get my reference. How about Andy Griffith? Remember Andy? Okay, I ran across this. We'll take just a little break here. Throughout the conference, we'll be doing corny marriage jokes, but this one isn't corny. This one's like, whoa. Okay, I ran across this. Listen to this. The reason Mayberry was so quiet and peaceful was because nobody was married. Andy, Aunt Bee, Barney, Floyd, Howard, Goober, Gomer, Sam, Ernest T. Bass, Helen, Thelma Lou, Clara, and of course Opie were all single. The only married person was Otis, and he stayed drunk all the time. All right, I rest my case. I can't do anything about this. Who's going to help a marriage, you know? Anyway. Now, as you're seeing, this does mean something in the feeling realm. Okay, sorry guys, but hearts don't just talk about the weather or deer season, all right? Hearts say things like, I'm hurting, or I'm scared, or I can see that you're really struggling, or I'm proud of what you did at work. In other words, you hear the feeling communicated there? That's heart. That's real connection. God calls it abiding with Him. And sometimes He says, these people honor me with their lip service, but their hearts are far from me. You ever hear that from your spouse? Okay? So if you want your marriage to grow or your dating to progress, your question would be, okay, here's ability number one. Can I let you in? Can I know what I feel, share what I feel, care what you feel? How good am I at that ability? Okay? And if you didn't learn it, cool. You can learn it. We'll talk about that, right? But the bottom line is, these are the problems in your marriage. Not that you married the wrong person or you're a bad whatever. Maybe you didn't learn this whole, how do I connect with my heart emotionally and bring that to another person, okay? Maybe you're lacking that software. Now, at this point in the conference, the connecting relational types are going, oh yeah, this is why I brought him. She's like elbowing him, hoping he's listening, you know, because that's what you're going to get at a marriage conference, right? Is the guys can go up here and say, y'all need to share your feelings more, you know? And he's thinking, it's not always the man, by the way. Me and Norma are reversed. I'm from Venus, she's from Mars. I'm the one going like, why do you always have to fix everything? Can I just share my feelings, you know? Quit watching the Taylor Swift football game and like, just let's be closer, you know? Anyway, that's kind of me. Anyway, the less connector types are out there going, oh, great, here we go, another touchy-feely marriage conference. He's probably going to break us into small groups to make us share our feelings, you know. Only if you tick me off, all right? If you tick me off, I'm going to break you into small groups. You know, I grew up at First Pres. All right, y'all know First Pres, right? Okay, so I've spent my whole life at First Pres. I taught Sunday school there for years, and I used to say, you know, I'd try to get them to interact, and I'm like, they wouldn't interact, and I'm like, look, either you guys interact or I'm breaking you into small groups. And all the hands would go, you know, all of a sudden, it's like gun to the head. All right, so the touchy-feely parts, those of us who are the touchy-feelers are going, yay, great, this is why I came. All right, but intimacy also means, for us relator types, there's two sides to it, remember. Have I developed the ability to feel loved and connected inside and hold on to love as opposed to just sharing it? In other words, can I keep you in? There's more to intimacy than sharing my heart. The other side of intimacy is, can I know I'm loved even if you are watching the Taylor Swift game? Okay? A lot of the problem with us connectee relator types is that we live our lives always wanting to connect and always wanting to share and always wanting you to listen to me and to be shared with all the time. And if that didn't happen, then I think maybe we have marriage problems. Okay? Instead, keep you in asks, how good am I in our marriage? Yeah, intimacy is great. Sharing is great. But how good am I in our marriage at feeling good, just kind of being me and knowing that you love me? And trusting that, and being grounded in that as opposed to needing connection all the time. That's keeping love in, okay? We're going to talk about this a lot more tomorrow because it's so key, and it's so not what you usually hear at a marriage conference. The other side of love is what you do with it once you get it. So sure, our spouse can learn more about connecting and intimacy. That's why I started with them, okay? But the other part is what do we do with love when we get it? Maybe they need to open up more, right? But how good are we at holding on to love when it's there? And hear me on this. This struggling with holding on to love or trusting connection, even if we're not all knee to knee sharing right now, is as big a problem in marriages as that robot spouse who can't connect. Hear me? Us, I'm a touchy-feely guy, okay? Us touchy-feelies, our connectors, our inability to know you love me even if you're scrolling Instagram instead of talking to me, that is as big a problem as you not connecting to me, okay? You guys, remember, no blame marriage? You're both bringing stuff to the table here, all right? So, did I learn the ability to feel loved and connected inside, okay? Otherwise, if we struggle here, I'll give you a preview of coming attractions for tomorrow. If we struggle here and we feel like they're not connected enough with us and we start complaining about that and kind of getting insecure or, why don't we talk more? They're going to start to experience that as needy or insatiable or you're disappointed and they're going to pull away from you, which is the last thing that you want, right? That's a dance. We'll talk about dances tomorrow. A huge dance with intimacy is I want more closeness, so I pursue you, but I pursue you in a way that feels gross, so you pull away. All right? We'll talk about that. All right? So, see, we're talking about character abilities in relationships. Can I reach out and share? Can I trust and not be needy? Okay? This is step one. And you can start to see how that would affect a marriage. That's what's behind our marriage problems, not that we're having enough date nights. And that is our point for the weekend, is looking at what these character abilities are. All right? By the way, what happens when can't let you in and can't keep you in go out on a date? It's love at first sight, man. I don't know why. But it's like, all I want is somebody who completely understands my heart. And the other one says, and I have absolutely no ability to do that. And we go, oh, it's love. I don't know why it is, but we attract each other like that. So anyway. Another, by the way, these things I'm going to be telling you, they're on a continuum. Okay, nobody's one or the other. You will tend toward one end of the spectrum. Okay, but I at least want you to have some categories to be thinking toward. Now, if you struggle in one of these areas, which you do, that's cool in the gang, okay? You're falling, welcome to the club. Talk to your spouse about it. Talk to your girlfriend about it. Bring that to your growth places, which we'll talk about later on. And quit fighting that blame marriage. You're both incomplete. You're not the bad guy, okay? And let's grow together. I want you saying, hey, that can't let you in thing that Cox was talking about, that's what you've been trying to tell me, right? You think? Okay? I'm a total bozo at that. And guess what? You're a bozo at keeping me in. So high five, all right? Right? That's a good marriage, okay? Second I, identity or separateness or boundaries. In other words, even though we're now one, there's still two people involved, okay? There's more to marriage and connection than just attachment and belonging. There's more to relationships and marriage than candlelight and bath soaps and Adele music, okay? There's also the issue of separateness and power and individuality, okay? Again, two sides. And these two sides are, did I learn the ability to be me, to know who I am, and did I learn the ability to have room for you to be you? Another super giant important pair of questions for us. In other words, what we're talking about here is what we call mutuality, which is as important as intimacy. People always say, well, what your marriage needs is more intimacy. Well, I'm about to explain to you how another thing marriage needs just as much is mutuality and separateness and power. And that dynamic of can I be close to you and can I be different from you is kind of the peanut butter and jelly of every relationship. We could do the whole marriage conference just on these. In fact, that's what tomorrow is. We're talking about intimacy and we're talking about conflict, okay? God talks about these all the time. He calls them peace and righteousness, love and limits, Mary and Martha. I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. What a great guy I am. You shall have no other gods before me. And God is always dancing between these poles of closeness and connection and limit setting. And marriage is going to do the same thing. But I kind of digress. I'm going to start talking like a seminary student if I'm not careful. All right? All right, second I. Can I be me? This is the ability to know who I am, to know what I want, to put my finger on my emotional pulse and ask, what do I value? Who is John Cox? The ability to say no when I need to, my ability to be different from you, close to you, connected with you, let you in, but also be different from you, okay? You know those people, and half of you are those people who can't be themselves because they're afraid somebody else is not going to like it. You know, and they're on every Sunday school committee because they can't say no. And they have trouble picking a restaurant because any place is fine, all right? And they sort of live controlled by their spouse or other people or what other people are going to think. And I'm kind of this emotional chameleon, kind of living in what we would technically call a one-down compliant child position. Ooh, I don't want to upset kind of the grown-ups in my life. In other words, I'm having trouble sort of being me. I saw a guy once years ago and he said, I'm like a sponge. And if I'm around purple water, I turn purple. And if I'm around red water, I turn red. And I just kind of become what I feel like other people want me to become. He was missing this ability to be who he was. And you can imagine the sort of trouble that would create in a life. So to you, those of you who struggle with this can I be me thing, I say this. In order to make a marriage work or a dating work, much less your job, much less your parenting, we need to have the ability in our lives, we need to have been taught in relationships, we'll talk more about that too, the ability to have a seat at the table, the ability to know who I am and make choices based on that, to be able to have a voice, okay? In other words, children need to learn to hear no, right? That's obvious. But you also hear, and why do 2-year-olds start to become terrible? Because that's the first time they're developing this. Something they're going to need as adults. All of a sudden, they're like, you know, my grandsons, they don't just say no, they have kind of this wind up. It's like, no! It's like it's out of the park, ladies. You know, it's like, got all this power to it. They are drunk with power because they're starting to have a sense of who they are. So yeah, part of the deal with a toddler is that they're just, you know, rotten little covenant breakers. But part of it is this is the first dawning of a sense of self. Those of you who read the parenting book learn all about that. And if we tame that, we create room for them to exist, but us too, then what you get is a powerful adult, okay? But if you never got that ability to say no or stand up or be who you are, then you walk into the world and you don't have any power. I have clients all the time who have a lot to say about this demanding, controlling spouse who's a big jerk, and they're doing all this he language and she language about them. And they're always telling me how to drive, and they're telling me how I'm supposed to spend money, and they're always telling me I'm not doing what they want. And when they tell me this stuff about the spouse, and that's bad and all. But I always say to them, you know, as they're using all this he language, you know, what about, I mean, they sound terrible. Yeah, I'm so sad. They're terrible. But what if just saying, instead of just complying with them or going along with them or being afraid of upsetting them or giving in to them and resenting them later and coming and telling your therapist about it, what if you said to them, you know what, look, I will discuss. I want what you're wanting to matter. It matters, and obviously you're displeased with me. But what I want matters too, and I'm kind of not okay with you ranting and being jerky to me if I'm not like doing dance monkey dance like you want me to, but I'll certainly work with you for us to try to figure out a way we both can matter. Okay? In other words, I say to them, And this is a real brain teaser, but what if there were two people in this marriage? You know, you might have the best marriage in Hinds County if it had you in it, you know? And they're always like, well, I'll tell you exactly what they'd say, or they get really mad. This person's being totally run by this other person, okay? Though sometimes those people who are yelling have a point. Corny marriage joke time. Guy's telling me, he goes, my wife walks in the room, and she's like yelling and screaming at me. She's like, you haven't heard a word I've said, have you? And I'm thinking, that's a really strange way to start a conversation. You get it? You get it? Okay. They're not all good. It's not all gold, all right? All right. Now, hear me on this. That doormat thing, that, you know, I'm going to be afraid to stand up and exist and push back, harms marriages as much as bully jerks do. Okay? So this is a vital character ability for that car to be able to do, the ability to be you and to have a sense of self. By the way, this is not selfishness. Selfishness means only I matter. Biblically speaking, spiritually speaking, this is stewardship. This is what God calls us to all the time. In other words, who am I? What do I believe? How do I make choices based on that? How do I let that be a factor in the game? This is Martin Luther saying, here I stand, I can do no other. This is Joshua leading the people in the promised land. And what does he say? Choose ye this day whom ye will serve. As for me and my house will serve Yahweh, okay, whatever. But you got to have a ye. Joshua's saying, reach inside and ask this question, what do I value? Where do I pour my commitment? Who is me who does that? Okay, you got to have that sense of self, that identity. And that's what a Christian psychologist means by a sense of self. Psychobabble psychology has turned it's like all about yourself, like be yourself. No, when we say self, what we mean is a sense of stewardship, of knowing who I am and what I value and letting that govern me, not being blown by every wind of doctrine, not being intimidated by somebody who tells me something. I know who I am in His image. That exploration is a holy thing, okay? And of course, the secularism corrupts it, but I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. All right, so again, you see what we're doing? I'm dissecting your marriage. I'm deconstructing it. I'm pulling it apart. What are the things that people need to do in order to do marriage? I have to be able to let you in emotionally. I have to be able to keep you in. I have to be able to be me, okay? By the way, before we get off the be me's, I gotta speak to one other can't be me besides doormats, and that is passivity, okay? The nice person sin. Passivity is basically... Your spouses know exactly what I'm talking about. Passivity is where I don't initiate in my life. I don't proactively act out of what I believe. I don't create anything. And so your spouse is having to always initiate everything. They're the ones having to say, that garbage is overflowing, would you take it out? Or this house is a wreck, would you do this? They're the ones having to say, we need to get that plumber, why don't we call the plumber? They're the ones having to initiate sex or initiate, let's talk again about that fight. And if they don't do it, it doesn't get done, okay? Now, this will drive your spouse crazy, you passive folks. Why? Because it puts them in a double bind. The double bind is this. If they do nothing, nothing's going to happen because you're passive, right? But if they do something and initiate, they're enabling you to be passive. That's why it drives them nuts, okay? That's why it makes them want to scream and yell. So if you're passive, you might want to take a look at that, which requires some initiative, which is exactly what you can't do, which is why passivity is hard to fix. Ha! All right, think happy thoughts. All right, so I swear, passivity is one of the hardest things to fix in my office. It's difficult. All right, now, part 2. Who do the doormats usually marry? Little Mr. or Miss Too Much Me, okay? This is sort of the side of, and this is me. I'm kind of the controllee, too much me, if you haven't figured that out already. Anyway, I'm a touchy-feely controlling jerk. Go do the math on that. But this is the people who are basically, hey, this is who I am. I know who I am. That's what I believe. You don't like it, there's a door, okay? So the next question is, can I let you be you? In other words, can I make room for you to exist and not protest that? Or is this all about me? Okay? The can't be me people can't say no. The can't let you be you people often can't hear no. When our spouses push back on us, we're like, what? Okay? This is the spiritual ability of mutual submission. Can I bend the knee to another person mattering besides just me, okay? And you can imagine our sin nature makes this one tougher. I mean, the Bible basically tells us we're all born and hold a board meeting and elect ourselves chairman, right? So we're kind of swimming against the grain here, but it's vital. I saw a couple a while back. Well, actually, it wasn't a couple at first, only she came. And her husband was this like little prince. He grew up in this kind of rich little family, and no one ever said no to him, and he was always just like worshiped and adored, and then he gets married, right? And basically, he just wants to kind of run the marriage from his little throne. So naturally, his wife ended up in therapy, because the jerks usually don't come to therapy. They're doing fine, thank you very much, you know? They make their loved ones need to have to come to therapy, right? So anyway, she's coming to therapy because living with him is driving her crazy. So my work with her, the only way to save a marriage like that is that I needed to start working on teaching her to exist and for her to start making sense of what it's like when he doesn't like that. So I started teaching her the can I be me stuff, because she was totally going invisible, because he would like have a hissy fit if she, didn't, make him feel wonderful about himself. So she starts pushing back, which has to happen to save this marriage. Well, that got him to therapy, okay? And he's literally confused, like at her pushback, like insulted, like how dare you not, just how dare you disagree with moi, And he was, of course, enchanted with me for teaching her the skill. But it forced him to have to grow up. He started coming to therapy. He started having to look at some of the ways in which he was hurtful because she existed enough here, okay? He didn't have that ability, can I let you be you? And one of the things that we'll talk more about tomorrow in the conflict thing is most of the I can't let you be you people are kind of unrepentant. We kind of like being in control. And the only way to start our growth process is for us to have limits set on us. Okay? In other words, this will become more relevant tomorrow, but I mean, there's two kind of people in the world, repentant and unrepentant. And what do repentant people need? They need tenderness and forgiveness and restoration and love and all sorts of goodies. And what do unrepentant people need? Well, they need to become repentant people, okay? And usually in God's universe, the way that happens is by encountering some kind of limits. One of the things I loved, the prophets chapters in the one story, my God book, ended up being some of my favorite chapters to write because God is super engaged in bringing painful limits to his people. And then by the end of the chapter, he's turning it around, and what is he saying? And then they will call for my name, and then I will draw them back to my... His goal is always to restore. But with unrepentant people, you have to start with the limits, okay? We'll talk more about this tomorrow, okay? So for us controller types, and like I say, I'm one of these, how good are we at our ability to embrace them being them, for them saying no to us, for them being different from us, all right? I have a couple a while back who every time his wife disagrees with him, he's like, I don't understand why you have to disrespect everything I say. And I'm like, she's not disrespecting you, she's just not you. I know that's a stretch, okay? But how do you make sense of that? All right, corny marriage joke. You ready? This guy's got this job interview for vice president of the bank. And he's kind of nervous. He gets dressed, best coat and tie. He goes downstairs to the kitchen. And his wife says, honey, you're going to do great. And pats him on the lapels and straightens his tie. And then kisses him and says, just remember, no matter what happens in that interview, you will always be vice president in this family. Okay, yeah, that one worked. Okay. Okay, so hear me, you doormats. Us controlling people, we need you to set limits on us. We need you to not let us control you. We need you to push back for this marriage to work. For this marriage to work, you have to exist in it. Half of the marriage therapy I do is about teaching people to push back on unrepentant people or people who are just stuck in nasty habits. My Marriage 2.0 conference, I'm getting a new version of it loaded up this week. I just did it in Raleigh. There's a talk on it called Dealing with Difficult People, in which is a whole talk on this kind of thing. And it's actually the number one talk downloaded on my podcast. Like, people go wild about it, whatever. All right. But anyway, when we begin a sentence by saying, what are you thinking inviting them to the party? All right. We need you to not respond like Chicken Little. Well, I thought y'all were friends from work and blah, blah, blah. Okay. We need you to say, whoa, I'm not sure if that's a question or a criticism. Which one do you think it is? Or, I don't think I want to do the you come at me with criticisms about what I'm doing thing tonight. Can we do a do-over? Like replay, instant replay. Let's try this again. We need you to have a limit on us like that. And we might get mad, but that's what that kind of relationship needs first. Not more love. It needs that kind of intervention. Okay? It's the only way to have a good marriage with an alpha or a bully or a jerk or a pouter or a criticizer. Okay? We can do more on that in Q&A, okay? This is why the stereotypical Christian response of, the wife who lives with the bully husband of go back and submit harder, doesn't work, okay? Growth for a controller, love for a controller, Christ-likeness for us often involves kind of some hard limits on this. I teach this all the time in my office, and it's so neglected. Anyway, to do all of that, you have to have a you, okay? Can you be you? Oh, look, I kind of got behind on there. Now, tomorrow we will talk about, if you're you in the marriage, we will talk tomorrow about dealing with the conflict that will inevitably create. Okay? But conflict's not a bad thing. You heard that here first, you codependent pleasers. Actually, the truth is, if we can resolve conflict in a good way, it will make our intimacy and our closeness better. Now, again, if you can't do these things, cool, great. We're going to talk about growing there. We're going to bring them to our growth places. But I want you growing in the right things. Not, ooh, we just need more time together. I want you to have some targets. Like, whoa, I am so bad at knowing who me is me. Or I really have trouble letting you be you. Or you know what? I'm good at letting you in. I'm hard at keeping you in. I want you to have some categories because that's actually how I think about marriage in the office. Which of these pieces might be missing? Okay. Now I'm going to tell you one last thing, and let's take a break for 10-ish minutes. Everything I'm saying to y'all here tonight and this weekend, my distinction about repentant versus unrepentant, everything I'm saying to you presupposes that you are repentant. In other words, I'm presupposing if you're willing to take a Friday night out and a Saturday morning to come to a marriage conference, that you care about changing and that you want to change. Okay? That's a daring thing for me to assume, because a lot of people I see in my office have spouses who are like, that's a bunch of psychobabble, I'm assuming you're repentant. And as I said, we'll talk more tomorrow about intervention with unrepentant people. But let me tell you this. Let's say you do have a spouse who doesn't care about all this stuff. And you're sitting there going, this sounds really great, but my spouse is like going, I'm not going to stupid marriage conference. Don't fret, all right? Because of this, there's hope for you even if your spouse isn't all in. Because of this, a marriage is a system. A marriage is like a baby mobile, okay? In other words, think about a baby mobile, okay? You got the little cross sticks and there's little Noah's Arks or something hanging down from it, right? All right, so what happens to the baby mobile if you cut one of the Noah's Arks off? The whole baby mobile shifts, all right? In other words, if you change one person in a marriage system, it'll change the whole system. And I joke with my colleagues, some of the best marriage work I do is individual work and growth with one of the spouses. And so often they'll say, oh, they just think it's a bunch of psychobabble, or they've seen every therapist in town until that therapist pushes back on them, and then they're never going back to that guy again, whatever. And that we need to get them in therapy. And it's like, no. No, in God's economy, therapy is not some room with a guy and a couch, okay? Therapy is any relationship in which I'm getting what I need to grow. So let's say your marriage is hurting and your spouse, quote, doesn't care. Listen to my Marriage 2.0 conference on the podcast. But if you say, I tell you what I'm going to do, I'm going to start doing my homework and learning to fill in these spots in my life. I'm going to bring this to my body of Christ people. As we'll say later tonight, your growth is not finished yet. If you start to grow, if you shift, it's like changing one of the gears in a clock. And whether the rest of the clock wants to change or not, it will change. I don't even know why. I kind of discovered it by accident. But if you are willing to do some growth and change, your spouse will have to shift. And a lot of times they won't even know why. I made a bet with a woman once. I said, your spouse doesn't need to come to therapy. We can change him from here. You do your growth and he'll change. She's like, nuh-uh. I'm like, bet me. She's like, what do you mean bet you? And I said, he doesn't change, I give you a free session. He does change, you give me dinner for two at Nick's. Remember Nick's over on Lakeland? Okay? So about 6 months later, she walks in the office, she's like, puts this gift certificate down, and I'm like, all right. That's not 100%. I would say it's 85. It's not 100. It's not 50. It's 85. But there's a good chance. So don't despair if you're out there going like, oh, wow, my spouse isn't here, and so there's no hope for me, okay?